From the National Weather Service in Raleigh, it's Nick Petro with your 11:30 Thursday morning, February 18 update. Winter storm underway across central North Carolina. And if you saw our briefing slides at 5 or 6 this morning, the trend since then has been to slightly lower storm total ice accumulations. So that's good news, real good news. Still, there'll be some impacts, and I'll get to that here in a minute. And I did add some temperature information regarding black ice concerns as we head into the next couple nights. The watch warnings and advisories have not changed. We still have winter storm warnings along the counties that touch I-85, and we have winter weather advisories, one tier of counties south of there, and a flash flood watch rather south and east. The triangle south and east. Okay, so let's start off with what is happening right now. And essentially, this is actually some good news. That here's the freezing line. If I can draw this, well, I'll start here in the triad, and I'll draw this. And if you are north of this line that I'm drawing, you are at or below freezing, and that is where the risk for freezing rain will be. So not to say that there could be some pockets of sub-freezing down in the western and southwest triangle, but generally speaking, based on the obs I have here, this is the areas that will have the potential for freezing rain. In fact, the color scaling on this probably isn't quite accurate. The radar, well, we try to color it based on the precipitation type. So anyway, this is probably icing that's happening. But the good news is this is, obviously it looks like the confinement of freezing rain along and north of 85 is going to happen here very soon, if it hasn't happened already. So anyway, and amounts so far have been a little less than kind of what we were thinking would have accumulated by now, and that's why we lowered our storm total ice accumulations, because so far the storm has been underperforming a bit. Although I will point out, I don't want to totally disregard what's going on here, but here's 2/10 of an inch, 1800ths, northern Forsyth. There's a 1/4 of an inch just across the Yadkin River, just west of Forsyth County, that is. And we've got some 1/4 to 3/10 of an inch of ice in Rockingham, Caswell, and there's 3/10 in northwest Person County. So these are all, everything I highlighted here is basically winter storm warning criteria. Okay, so again, we think the worst of it is going to be along and north of 85. Okay, there has been some light freezing rain amounts here in the triangle, but certainly under a 1/10 of an inch, and light down the northern Uwharrie region, Asheboro, under a 1/10. So really don't think there'll be many serious or notable impacts south of 85. And a quick look at the power outages would suggest that clearly along and north of 85, and particularly the northern triad region, is where the power outages are concentrated right now, and where the worst of the icing is. But I will point out this webcam, courtesy of WRAL, this is a loop from about the last 2 hours, and look at the trees. Look at this tree here. This is in Roxborough. So if you're up along the Virginia border, watch this bunch of trees. Watch what happens to the tree over the course of the last 2 hours. See them bending? See them tilting and falling? That's trees getting weighed down with ice. So, it's only a matter of time before trees start to break, in a more widespread fashion, particularly along and north of 85. It's only a matter of time. So anyway, I do expect power outages to become a little bit more, picking up here a little bit more when we get that second wave, if you will, that second wave of ice that we are expecting. Okay, later today, we've been talking about the so-called second wave that's coming. Okay, so that second wave is what's going to basically put the finishing touches on breaking some tree branches and some trees along and north of 85, particularly near the Virginia border. Okay, kind of, quite frankly, just like last week's event. You know, this event is turning out to be very, very similar, or will turn out to be very similar to last week's event. Okay, not much worse, I don't think. And to that point, I've made some slight tweaks to the main points. Instead of saying instead of saying widespread power outages and more ominous, we've kind of toned this down a little bit, where heavy icing it will be confined along and north of 85. South of 85, it's going to be more light, limited freezing rain ice accumulations with up to 0.2 of an inch. Okay, so power outages, if there are widespread power outages, it would be, again, the triad north, 85 north towards the Virginia border. We are still concerned about flash flooding, and obviously rivers are already flooding, so that's a given. But flash flooding is still a concern. Okay, that's particularly across the eastern portions of central North Carolina and southeast portions of central North Carolina. So we've trended these arrows back a little bit. We brought the heavy icing back from significant to elevated. But don't let that fool you. I mean, if your power goes out, your power goes out. I mean, if a tree branch or if a tree breaks and falls across the road, that's impactful. So, so anyway, here's how we think this sort of second wave will move in. These are the latest radar simulations and live radar in the upper left. And you can see things kind of get real patchy this afternoon. So, it's not until about 6 p.m. that we start seeing it a little bit more concentrated move in. But you know what? Even at that, it looks like some of the latest models are showing it more patchy rather than this big blob of precipitation. If that continues to be the case, if it's more patchy, then this event may end up turning not quite as bad as what we were thinking. But it does appear, based on the temperature profile I showed at the beginning slide, where based on current temperatures right now, it looks like if there are problems with freezing rain, again, it's going to be confined along and north of 85 and including the triangle. And you could see how these models bear that out right here. There's the 85 corridor and there's the freezing rain along and north of it. So anyway, I'm not so sure that this is going to happen where it sneaks south, but nevertheless, the event will be winding down by then. But the point is that even north of 85, where the models simulate that's where freezing rain will occur, and I can kind of back that up based on current observations. Even there, the simulations here are pretty patchy. That said, we've already got nearly a 1/4 inch of ice already in that area, and you could see on that webcam I showed you, the trees are. It ain't going to take much more ice to break some of those trees. So patchy or not, patchy or steady, any additional freezing rain will lead to more power outages and more broken trees. Okay, so we're not out of the woods yet. And notice the last thing before I move on from this slide. Notice some of the concentrated rain showers and almost like looking like thunderstorm type downpours. And that's why we put here rain heavy at times, and that's why we're concerned about the risk for flash flooding later today, particularly south and east of Raleigh. And that's where we have the flash flood watch in effect. Okay, so let's go ahead on to the next slide, which shows, okay, what's the total ice? Well, this has been toned back slightly. And, if it becomes more patchy than concentrated, it may need toned back just a bit more. But I will point out that you see that purple area north of 85, we're pretty close to those storm total values already. It won't take much more, maybe a 1/10 or 2 more of ice to hit these 0.31 numbers, 0.3 numbers. Okay, so we're close. We're getting close to, so how much additional? That's on the left. So basically from here on through the rest of the event. Now, a 1/4 inch of ice in Roxborough, that's if it becomes more steady. Okay, but if it remains on the patchy side, maybe it's slightly less than that. But basically, it could be up to a 1/4 inch of additional rain up in Person County, northern Granville, Northwest Vance up near the Virginia border. Okay, so the bottom line is the highest amounts of freezing rain and ice are expected north of 85, lesser south of 85, but still impactful. It drops off really quick. So I think, unless you're up near, Wake Forest or Falls Lake, I think most of the Wake County should be okay. The northern half of Franklin County might be kind of, getting in on a little bit of that ice. And, the Chapel Hill Durham area, you're going to be right on that transition. So I don't know if it could go either way, but particularly the further southeast you go from Durham and Chapel Hill, the better it'll get. And then, we've already had, 500s, 600s near Asheboro. So, a tenth of an inch of ice looks like that's very well achievable. Okay. So anyway, let's see. Yeah. So that's pretty much, what we think in terms of additional ice. All right. This is just a quick look at how much rainfall we're expecting. And 2 inches of rain, especially if it comes down in a short period of time, with a thunderstorm, that's a lot of rain, and that could lead to flash flooding. So, certainly don't want to understate the flash flood risk here. So that is still on the table. So, at the end of the day, that might be one of our bigger concerns. Not to take away from a 1/4 inch of ice up north of 85. That is a huge concern. But my point is folks south and east of Raleigh, don't think you're off the hook here because you're not getting the ice. You're definitely this is a high risk situation because of the flash flood potential for those south and east of Raleigh. Okay. All right. So if you want to look at the specific details for rivers, there's the websites. But again, this is pretty much the same as what we've been talking about the last day or two. The Neuse River, the Cape Fear, the Tar River, the Roanoke River, they're all set to go into flood and or already in flood. All right. And here's our table. And I won't spend a whole lot of time. I'll be emailing this out so you can take a look at this and peruse this on your convenience there. But basically, those rivers I already mentioned are the ones that are going to be affected. It looks like mostly minor flooding. And I'm looking at that max forecast crest height. The orange means minor flooding. Red means moderate flooding. So the only two places we see moderate flooding occurring will be Neuse River at Goldsboro and the Tar River at Tarboro. Okay. And what about temperatures? Okay. So a lot of folks will ask, well, what about black ice? What happens after this, and when the temperature get above freezing? When will we be able to melt some of that ice? And so essentially the temperatures are going to be very steady today. So where you're at now is where you're going to be temperature wise through pretty much right through the rest of today and even tonight. Look at the temperatures kind of flatlined right through tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow morning after sunrise, we finally get to see some warming. So we get above freezing pretty much across all of central North Carolina by 9 a.m. And then it looks like a pretty good opportunity to melt some of that ice with high temps topping out in the lower 40s. Even up north, there could be readings in the lower 40s. Now, my concern obviously is that particularly along and north of 85, where the temperature is already below freezing and likely to remain below freezing. Clearly, that's where there could be some icy spots tonight. But tomorrow night, almost all of central North Carolina will drop below freezing and into the mid to upper 20s. Okay, so that clearly, once we get to about midnight tomorrow night, that's when we'll start to see some black ice concerns occur. And that's basically where the roads remain wet. Now, if the roads obviously dry tomorrow during the daytime, great, no black ice concerns. But if the sun sets and you've got wet roads in your area, that will obviously lead to a black ice concern. And although it's cut off at the end, you can see temperatures will be climbing there on Saturday and should be above freezing certainly by 10 a.m. or maybe 11 o'clock. If you want specific details for your exact location, obviously I have limited space on a PowerPoint slide, so I can't include every site in central North Carolina. But if you want hour by hour specific details, click this link, and then that'll take you to a web page where you can go ahead and just click on your location. But before you do that, either pick your city from this list, use this drop down to get either hourly weather graph or digital tabular. So hourly weather graph, and then pick your city, and then hit submit, or click this map and you can get that hour by hour for your specific city. Okay. So anyway, definitely use this link here at the bottom of this slide. All right. And so to kind of button this all up, about 0.3 of an inch of storm total accumulation north of 85. We're pretty close to that. We're only about 1/10 of an inch away. Particularly, north near the Virginia border, north of I-85. So that's going to give you some tree damage, power outages, and I do expect the number of power outages to increase, especially with that second wave of icing later today. Okay, and it may not be a wave, it might be more patchy, but it'll probably give you, at least if you're north of 85, at least another 1/10 of an inch, and that should push some of those trees over the edge. Okay, so south of 85, including the northern I-95 corridor, the far western Triangle region, and areas just north of the Uwharrie National Forest region, I'm thinking like Randolph County, a trace to up to 2/10 storm total is possible, which could result in some tree damage, localized power outages, and especially elevated roads would be the risk for slick spots. All right, and if you're south of those areas I just mentioned, it's an all-rain event. If you're south of those areas, watch for localized heavy rain and possible flash flooding, as I mentioned earlier. And definitely check out those websites that I included if you have interests along area rivers. Okay, so this is our last live webinar for this event. The event's underway, and but we'll email these slides out as usual. We'll post them to our webpage. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube after the fact and you're not on our email list, don't worry. You can go to weather.gov/Raleigh, and these slides are posted right at the very top of that webpage, weather.gov/Raleigh. So if you're not on our email list, you can get them that way too, top of weather.gov/Raleigh. All right, so and we'll be updating these slides throughout the day as needed. And with that, I will be happy to take any